Our agenda is for roll call.
So moved.
We'll take the roll call now. Please state your name, whether you are remote or if you're at the high school. Mrs. Sealing?
Here at Spring Hill High School.
Mr. Boyle?
Here, remote.
Mr. Hoffman?
Here, remote.
Mr. Winbolt?
Here, Springer at High School.
Mr. Updike?
Here, Spring Hill High School.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Here, remote.
Mr. Anderson?
Here, Spring Hill High School.
All here.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming into this meeting. Thank you for the audience for coming in. Next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda.
Move to approve. No Snells Anderson.
Second. This is Jason Winbolt.
Moved and seconded for approval of the agenda. Any discussion, additions, or questions? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start with Mr. Boyle.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt?
Yes.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing?
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Thank you. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States.
States of America. And
Very good. Thank you. We're going to move on. This is a town hall meeting that we have various times during the year to give updates on progress and things that we've done within the district. And so what we've done tonight, we'll execute the public participation during this time period. And so we'll combine the two time periods. So we have 30 minutes planned for town hall, and we have 30 minutes, as is our regular process, for public participation. We'll combine those, have a maximum of 60-minute time period for public participation, and move on from there. If someone does not have enough time, or we do run out of time before everyone has spoken, your time slot for your public participation will be moved to the next agenda at the next stated meeting. To go over the ground rules for public participation, number one, the board does not hear personnel issues. We handle that in executive session. So we ask that you not identify individuals, do not bring those before within the public participation. We also allow up to 5 minutes this evening. Based on the participation cards that we have in hand right now, we will allow 5 minutes for each speaker. The board clerk will keep track of your time, so please respect those her warnings as you approach the 5-minute time period. According to our process, as I mentioned earlier, we do not hear personal complaints concerning employees or groups of employees of the school district or any person connected with the school district during open session. All personnel matters are referred to the administration, who then reports to the board in executive session. Each speaker, as I mentioned, will have a maximum of 5 minutes. The board clerk will be our timekeeper. She will notify you as you approach that 5-minute time period. So with that, we will move on to public participation. First card I have is for Mary Kay McCormick.
Good evening. Thanks for having us this evening. Can you hear me okay? All right. My name is Mary Kay McCormick. My husband and Mike and I have 3 children in the Spring Hill School District. First of all, I want to say thanks for this opportunity to speak tonight. And I want to thank all the teachers, staff, principals that have worked so hard to teach our kids and be flexible, showing up every day and doing your job no matter what. Well, I'm here tonight to request, dare I say, demand our school board implement its own executive plan that is specific to the Spring Hill community for moving kids back to in-person learning. The board has taken the stance to look at one and only one medical number that has been handed down to them by the county to determine if our local children should be allowed to learn in person or be isolated at home to educate themselves. From corporate America to Main Street, Spring Hill, to every household within these great United States, not one of these entities makes any sort of decision based on only one factor. In fact, highly critical decisions take multiple factors. All of these individuals take time to make a plan, utilizing multiple advisors, seeking relevant data, asking pertinent questions from a variety of resources, all while looking at the goal at hand. This is how wise executive plans, business execs, small business owners implement and execute a plan that gets the results they want and expect. The community has not seen this from the Spring Hill board. These are your shareholders. They are not happy and they are not satisfied with your results. The next point I want to make about planning is that these children and teachers have to be looked at as not only a physical being. Pediatricians and primary care physicians look at a person as an entire entity. They spend half their time visiting with you about your activities, about your home life, friendships, interests, fears, concerns, goals you have for your life. They look at a person in their entirety. Currently, the board is only looking at the physical health of students, teachers, and parents. By ignoring the fact that online learning is causing children, teachers, and parents to have anxiety, stress-related illnesses, depression, substance abuse, emotional isolation, as well as many more mental health problems.
1 minute.
The board is telling them, we do not care about you as a whole. I am here tonight asking and expecting the board to start taking real action and implement their own plan that is detailed and specific to the community of Spring Hill that will take these children back to in-person learning. The new plan must utilize multiple points, medical data, hospitalization, death rates, mental health statistics. Teachers and parents must be surveyed for opinions, data, input. The plan then should be presented back to your stockholders. Lastly, I am here representing not only my family of 5, many of you have students in the local district, many don't have kids here anymore. I know the seats aren't full tonight. However, I do know I'm representing a multitude of parents and guardians that tonight cannot physically be here or cannot emotionally bring themselves to share their true feelings because of fear of repercussions. These are people like my friend who works the late shift. She can't come tonight. All of these people need to be heard. We are charged to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. I ask you to do that as I am tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mary Kay. The next card I have is Larkin Fails.
I will be reading that one.
Okay, thank you.
I am writing
Could you
today.
please repeat the name?
Larkin Fails. I am writing today to share some thoughts and to put something on the forefront of minds as these discussions continue. I am hopeful that we will have moved past changing guidelines quickly, but with the constant push from some groups of parents to throw things out the window and get back to normal as soon as possible, I feel it is important to continue to support teachers and staff and provide some other sides of the argument that seem to be being ignored. As of this morning when I wrote this, 7 teachers and school staff across the nation have died from COVID-19. 7. 1 in a neighboring district even. We've barely started the school year and already schools across the nation are in mourning over huge losses from their communities. 1 was a special education teacher, another 3rd grade teacher. 1 was age 34, another 28. For a moment, picture it being your child's teacher or a teacher in our district. Can you imagine the pain that would bring to our community? We keep speaking about mental health, but can we focus on what the mental health of all of us would be like if someone dies in our district? We very much need to continue to follow the guidelines placed before us by healthcare professionals, and we very much need to think of those around us potentially not being here anymore because we rushed a decision that didn't need to be rushed. With our elementary buildings being open, it is already a risk. Little kids are not immune, nor are the staff members. Let's not rush to open our secondary buildings where the risk is even higher. We are putting so much on our teachers and staff by requiring them to do temperature checks, be the mask police, and constantly worrying about hand washing and sanitizing surfaces, as well as perform the normal daily tasks. Let's be sure that we are claiming to really support them, that we actually do that by listening to them when they say they want to follow this plan. Again, I am sharing this to place this in the minds of everyone who continues to push for us to reopen and ignore health and safety concerns as another side of the issue to consider. Let's continue to use sound judgment and science. Thank you, Dr. Burke, Mr. Wilson, and the board for being strong leaders during this time. It is much appreciated to have leaders that listen to experts to make decisions.
Thank you, Candy, and thank you, Larkin Fails, for your input. Moving on to the next card I have is Kirsten Adkins.
Good evening, school board. My name is Kirsten Adkins. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Olathe and the executive director of Pathway to Hope. We serve individuals and families facing serious mental illness. I also happen to have 4 grandchildren.
Could you wait just one second? Phil, I think we have could we turn her microphone up so we could hear her a little more clearly? Sorry to interrupt you.
I couldn't hear the feedback. Great. Would you like me to start again? Can you hear me?
Yeah, please start again. We can hear you now.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Good evening. My name is Kirsten Adkins. I'm a licensed professional counselor with a private practice in Olathe, and I'm the executive director of Pathway to Hope. We serve individuals and families facing serious mental illness. I also happen to have 4 grandchildren in your school district, and I'm really grateful for all the work that you're doing, the efforts that you're making to help our kids live rich, full lives in the midst of really challenging circumstances. I work 6 days a week in the mental health field. I tend to see the worst of the worst situations from my vantage point. Many of the people I work with are living with serious mental illness, and at Pathway to Hope, we spend our time helping families navigate the very challenging systems to help their families find mental health services. If you've never done that, be grateful. It is very, very challenging. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It helps us determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Mental health is important at every single stage of life, and we all need to have good mental health. One of the struggles in our current predicament is that we have collectively allowed mental health to be something that is only addressed seriously when it becomes serious. So now we're at a highly aware of the potential consequences. We feel ill-equipped to make decisions that we know are going to affect everybody's mental health. A recent article in Politico quoted a CDC study back in June of 5,400 young adults, and they were looking over the last month about their mental health. 1 in 4 of those 5,400 people had considered suicide in the past 30 days. At Pathway to Hope, I've seen a 500% increase in crisis calls where people are actually looking for a suicide assessment. I didn't used to call only suicide assessments crisis calls, but it's been a significant increase. I'm grateful to say that I don't know of any of those who have committed suicide, but I do know that suicide has happened in Johnson County. And to those people who have lost their loved ones, those are significant losses. We don't collectively grieve them, but it is a significant loss to our community. Because I care about mental health and suicide prevention, I talk a lot about learning coping skills and building resilience. Resilience empowers people to accept and adapt to situations and move forward. It's personal and it's pretty complex. Your resilience depends heavily on the support you receive from your community. I'd like to spend the balance of my time talking about how you can contribute to that for children and families you're serving here on the school board. In an article from Everyday Wellness, they talked about the top 5 protective factors that help build resilience, that improve coping skills and adaptivity. The first is social support. You might understand that as people who have immediate or extended family, community, friends, and organizations. I think what we need to understand is that people who even seem to be in a supportive family may still struggle. Children may not have the support from their family because their family is also struggling. The second factor is realistic planning. The ability to make and carry out realistic plans helps individuals play to their strengths and focus on achievable goals. Living in an unknown future makes long-term goals questionable and adds additional stress when children don't know about what their future is going to look like, and we make that remain unclear. The third is self-esteem. And when social supports are removed, self-esteem can fluctuate. Someone who has appeared confident can actually be in a challenged space and need their help to find resilience.
1 minute.
Coping skills. The problem is hardest to measure with kids. They appear quite fine 1 minute and the next minute they're in a meltdown mode. It's also a challenge when adults are not coping well because kids look to adults for their cues. This is an area where I think you have the largest opportunity to help your parents and students. We all know about communication skills, and in our area, we have the 0 Reasons Why campaign. I applaud that campaign, but I want to challenge everybody to be an adult where anybody can walk up to you and say, I'm not okay, and you know what to do about that. Emotional regulation. There's been a really strong movement towards mindfulness at all levels of education in the United States. And the reason is because mindfulness is an exceptional tool in helping the individual maintain emotional regulation. Breathing and body awareness help to keep us connected to ourselves so we are in a place where we can connect to others. The struggle with our current COVID situation is the disconnection from the tangible relationships that allow adults to see specifically into the eyes of kiddos and almost inherently see when that kid is not doing well. Another tangible struggle is that much of our perceived connection is, especially for kids, coming from social media. Social media is a drug. Literally, it affects the brain like a drug.
Time.
Thank you. We're biological imperative to connect with each other. That directly affects the dopamine and the reward pathway in our brains. Social media optimizes the way a connection is made through algorithms, attention extraction, commodification of our personal information, and it actually isn't giving any actual connection. When our kids' primary source of connection is social media, we're setting them up for a mental health crisis. I can't tell you what the best thing to do is. I can encourage you to continue to carefully weigh the various threats that you're faced with and manage the fears that attempt to divide us. I appreciate your time and attention tonight, and I can be of further support. I've given you my contact information.
Thank you, Kirsten. Any other cards for public participation?
No, we're done.
That does conclude then the town hall business with individuals public participation, both components of that agenda item. Moving on to recognitions, Dr. Burke.
Yeah, Morning Grange has done a donation of dictionaries, I don't know, at least for 20 to 25 years. And I don't think the gentleman was able to come here tonight, but they've done a great job of making sure that they continue to provide dictionaries for our kids. And so I'd like to applaud them and recognize them, and we'll make sure those dictionaries get over to our students. And with that, I'll move on to the principals. So Prairie Creek Elementary, Jody Cole.
Good evening. I would like to recognize our custodians, Mark Howard and Dan Huffman. They work round-the-clock miracles to keep our building clean and safe. I would also like to recognize our morning arrival team, Maria, Brooke, Bobby, Ariel, Angie, Regina, Karen, Brian, Anton, Melissa, and Megan. They take temperatures every day in the parking lot from 7:40 till 8 o'clock, rain or shine. I appreciate their help and making the start of each day a positive one. Thanks.
Spring Hill Elementary, and I saw her on here. I know that she's not feeling very well, but Tammy Endicott.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to take a few minutes to recognize our instructional coaches across the district, but I mean, especially mine, April 11. I see her, how hard she's worked, and I know she's worked hand in hand with all the instructional coaches, and they really work a lot of hours, and they are so passionate about what they do and dedicated. And they did some great PD for our teachers to get them ready for remote learning, optional remote learning, and for on-site. So I just wanted to recognize them because I know they put a lot of time in. I see April leaving at 6:30 and 7 every night. She's usually there later than I am. And I keep telling both of us we need to leave. Both of us we need to leave earlier, but we're still there. But I just wanted to really recognize them because they have put in a lot of time to make sure that what we're doing is successful.
Woodland Spring Middle School, Rod
And
Sprague.
Dr. Burke, just one second. Tammy, when you talk about PD, what exactly are you talking about?
The 12 days, 12 to 14 days, I can't remember, I lost track of right before school started, where they were modeling and training for all of our staff how to properly set up for optional remote and remote learning, as well as how to do it on site so that it was a seamless transition if we ever had to go remote.
PD stands for Professional Development.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
No, I appreciate the detail because it emphasizes the kind of the dual path that teachers are on. Thank you.
Now, Rod Sprague.
Good evening. I'd like to recognize two groups. First up, I'd like to recognize my leadership team. This is a group of people that have come together and worked through all of the professional learning that we needed to do, but also worked to prepare our staff for remote learning. And they've done a tremendous job. And I'll be honest with you, I couldn't do this job without them. So just want to say thank you to them. Also, I'd like to recognize all of our coaches. We started sports, and on top of everything they've been learning and doing, they're also coaching and doing a great job with our kids. We've had a very successful start to our year. I do want to recognize two cross-country runners. We had two school records set this last week. First was 8th grade boys with 2-mile time of 12:01:08. That was Logan Beckman. And now I'm going to have a proud dad moment. Elsie Sprague set the 7th grade 2-mile record with a time of 15:52:18. She beat that record by 3 minutes. So we were really proud of both of those guys. It's been a great start, and we look forward to more.
Spring Hill Middle School, Trevor Gertson.
Well, good evening. I would like to take just a moment to recognize the new teachers at Spring Hill Middle School. They picked quite a time to get into education, and they have just been a great part of the team and great part of the community, and really, really proud of the work they have done to get the year started. And so new math teacher we have in Katie Sibbett, new social studies, which was kind of a last minute addition for us, and Meredith Hillis, new special education teachers in Sarah Gromer and Max Penachet, a long-term sub for special education as well in Courtney Lohman, new art, Allison Vermillion, and my fabulous new assistant principal, Callie Whitesole. And so just so grateful for the new staff members that we have, the people that have been able to jump in real quick and be part of a great team. And I should also don't want to forget Ashley Jasper, who's joining us this year to help us with language arts and social studies.
Spring Hill High School, Mark Williams.
Hi, good evening. First of all, I just want to commend the high school teachers. They put in a countless number of hours getting ready for each and every day and working with our kids on a daily basis. They're doing a fantastic job. But more specifically, I want to recognize Clay Fregon and Rebecca Fawcett. These two individuals are our front line for the technology within our building, and they're working with the kids and the parents when they call in if they're having any issues with their computers. And they spend a great deal of time working with them and help solve their issues, or then communicating on to Phil and the tech department if they need assistance with that. And then finally, I'd like to recognize Giselle McDonald. Giselle has done a fabulous job coming as the instructional coach of the high school. She has prepared the teachers and worked with the teachers each and every day to get them ready for remote, get them ready for hybrid, get them ready for in-person, and plus also get ready to teach a class herself. And so she has done just a tremendous job getting us ready for this school year.
Wolf Creek Elementary School, Beth Cooper.
Hi, tonight I would like to speak a little bit about our special education team, starting at the top with Mrs. Jados, our director, including our school psychologists and all of our teachers. They have spent countless hours this late summer, early fall, getting our school year started. That had to begin with just understanding all the new requirements and regulations that came down through the state for special education. It's required them to reach out to parents and do a lot of extra communicating, set up lots of extra meetings, and lots of extra paperwork. That is all in addition to the work that they always do, taking really great care of kids. So I just wanted to recognize them this evening.
I was also going to recognize Cindy Jados tonight. There had been an inordinate amount of IEPs that had been redone with different things that we're looking at. So Mrs. Jados and her team has done an outstanding job. Timber Sage Elementary School, Darcy Sly.
Good evening. I would like to recognize the two secretaries out front that have helped me tremendously within the last few days. Just every time I ask for something, they're right there with it within seconds, and it's just been very helpful. I also want to recognize Lisa Conzum, the instructional coach there at Timber Sage. She has done a phenomenal job getting our testing up and running and almost complete already for MAP testing and for DIBELS testing. And then Abby Robertson for helping me. She's the counselor there at Timber Sage, also kind of getting me up to speed on the families and what's going on at Timber Sage and the important information that I need. So they've been very helpful, making this a smooth transition for me and a successful one, I believe. So I want to say thank you to them.
I believe Stephanie Barnhill had something that she wanted to share.
Good evening. I want to recognize the entire staff of the Spring Hill Early Learning Academy. Their dedication and hard work made our students return to school a real celebration. In preparing for that first day of school, we focused on how to implement all the new procedures required to keep everyone healthy and safe. And there were lots of discussions about how to adjust and adapt the educational strategies and best practices in the midst of the current environment so that our students would still be able to interact with each other. The staff's "we can do this" attitude continues to make every day a joyful experience filled with learning and play for our students. And I just want to thank them because we couldn't do it without all of them.
Is there any other directors that has a recognition?
It's Brent Hoffman, and I wanted to add something. Wanted to put a shout out to Mr. Harwood. That was at our last meeting. It was a very long meeting, and he stayed all the way to the end. And somehow he came prepared to speak, and somehow he got missed. I just wanted to apologize to him for hanging out for that long and not getting to speak.
Is there anybody else? Okay.
Dr. Burke.
Oh, Brad Wilson.
Yeah, I wanted to recognize our instructional coaches, and our principals have done a fabulous job of that as well. Giselle McDonald, Mika Bauer, Jolene Rutledge, April Levitt, Angie Janovic, Susan Tice, and Lisa Conzum. But I'd also like to recognize our teachers that work with them who have started this year fabulously in difficult situation, and also the principals who have given outstanding leadership in their buildings in this time. Thank you.
Now I believe we're finished.
Very good, thank you. My apologies as well, Brent. I wasn't aware of that, that someone got missed at our last board meeting. Moving on to consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of three different things: approval of consent agenda items, approval of the minutes of the last stated meeting, and personnel. Any questions or discussion on consent agenda?
Mr. President, this is Jason Winbolt. I move that the board approve the consent agenda.
Nels Anderson, I second.
It's moved and seconded for approval of the consent agenda. Any further discussion, questions, or comments? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start with Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
approved.
Thank you. Moving on to action items. First action item is National Suicide Prevention Month and proclamation. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, I remember that we are part of the Zero Reasons Why. And a year ago, we asked the board to approve a proclamation stating that this is the National Suicide Prevention Month. And usually we say prevention and intervention. And so, again, this is not something that has gone away. It's something, unfortunately, has hit nearby recently to one of our fellow school districts. We want to continue to be diligent in our thoughts and continue to work with our mental health agencies and, more importantly, our students to do everything that we can to never have to attend a suicide funeral again, or a funeral due to suicide again. So with that, we ask that the board approve National Suicide Prevention Month. And I believe September 25th is the day that we've designated that if you have one of the 0 Reasons Why shirts, we are asking anybody in the community to wear that shirt on the 25th.
Any questions, discussion, comments?
Mr. President, oh, sorry. Mr. President, I move to make September National Suicide Month within our district.
Brent Hoffman, I second the motion.
It's moved and seconded to approve the proclamation as September is National Suicide Prevention Month. Any final discussion or comments? Candy, please collect a vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Woodbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
approved.
Thank you. Moving on to our second agenda item, which is the easement for the roundabout at 199th Street and Ridgeview Road. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, we spoke about this at the last board meeting. This is to give up a small piece of property there. I believe it is on the southwest corner of our property. And we're excited for them to get the roundabout up and running. And we ask the board to approve approves the easement for the roundabout.
Any questions on the easement? It's 183 square feet at the southwest corner of our property here at the high school.
Yes, this is Nels Anderson. Do we have to move any of our facilities to be able to accommodate this?
In talking to Tim Meek, and I believe Tim's still on here, but no, we should not have to move anything.
Thank you.
Mr. President, we did have to evaluate the depth of our fiber, but we are at this point out of the way. We potentially do have to move, but that's where it crosses the road, not part of this easement.
What would be the cause for us to move our fiber?
It would be a pretty big range. It would depend on how many feet and whether we had enough service loop. In this particular case, it would be a few $1,000s, but again, it's where it crosses the public road right away, not in our easement. So even if they didn't have to take some of our property, we would potentially be on the hook to move it. I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear that we do have some potential space that needs to be moved.
And this is to accommodate the construction of the roundabout?
Yeah, so where they have to over excavate and move the road beds, our fiber was potentially in the way. In our evaluation, we're fine, but if the construction changes, we would potentially have to move some of it.
Okay, so it'd be a contingency.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion about the property for the roundabout?
Mr. President, this is Jason Winbolt. I move that the board approve the easement for 199th and Ridgeview.
Sharon Mitchell, second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the easement for the roundabout at 199th Street and Ridgeview Road. Any final discussion or comments? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll begin with Mr. Updike.
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Excuse me. Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing.
Yes.
Mr. Boyle.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt.
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to our third action item is the board workshop, which is a special meeting on October 5th. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, we've been working with KSD and Brian Jordan. He is available on the 5th. And believe it or not, all 7 school board members are available on the 5th as well. And so we would like to meet at Hilltop. He does not think it will take a full 3 hours, but we wanted to make sure that we gave enough time for discussion and talk. And this is based about the review of the handbook and the self-survey done by the school board. So we're asking that you go ahead and approve this meeting.
And this meeting will be open to the public?
Yes,
And what do we need to do in preparation?
say that again.
What can we do in preparation for that?
I believe that you should get some feedback from KSDE about the actual, I'm trying to think of the word that we called it. When we went over the board and your board packet, the evaluation. You should get that ahead of time so you can go over that.
So Brian Jordan at Kansas Association of School Boards has created a survey in SurveyMonkey. We've all received a link to that. If you haven't, certainly let me know. So let Candy know so that she can ensure everyone has that link. But that survey does need to be completed by September 29th so that they can do some analysis of the feedback and information. That's the pre-work that is required to be done by the 29th so we can have some good insight.
It's probably also best to review the handbook just so you're familiar for whenever we go over it as well.
Any other questions or comments? This is an action item.
Mr. President, this is Nels Anderson. I move that we approve the board workshop on October 5 from 6 to 9 p.m.
This is Brent Hoffman. I second the motion.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded to approve the board workshop as a special meeting on October 5th. Any final questions or comments? Candy, please collect the vote.
We will start the vote with Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing.
Yes.
Mr. Boyle.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt.
Yes.
Mr. Updike.
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to discussion items. Bond construction update. Dr. Burke.
Yeah, Tim Meek is our Director of Construction and Safety, and he'll give you an update.
All right, well, let me get my screen shared here and we'll all right. The 2016 bond issue, there's really has been no changes. We're still holding the same contingency of $2.54 million. So, which mostly will go for land purchases and infrastructure for new middle school and other land purchases potentially. Budget for 2018 bond issue. At this point, there are no changes to it as well. There's no, I'll talk when I get down to Dayton Creek about a potential change order that we might have coming, but as of right now, there's nothing that we need action on. Educational Support Center is on schedule to be finished in November. Next milestones is to finish the corrective work on the east side of the Education Support Center. We've punched out 2/3 of the building and continue to work on those items to get those finished up. We've got a small amount of the building that's done, has some furniture installed done, which you'll see in some pictures here. And then hopefully early November, late October, we'll have substantial completion and a full TCO on the building. So right now we've got a partial verbal TCO so we can store a little bit of stuff. We had some furniture overflow from moving furniture out for distancing in our schools, and we've stored some of it in there. So that's been one of my successes. Commercial Forworks come in and got the south end of the building, which is ready to go. The carpeting and the flooring done in there. Challenges are still JR and Company getting the east side done, but they are moving and progressing, and we're getting it done right, passing all water tests as we go. We're documenting all work, heavy on the supervision of it, so make sure it's done right and everything passes on. Safety report, 297 days of accident free. So a couple of pictures, you can see landscape going in on the perimeter of the building. We're still going to be holding off on the east side of it. You can kind of see the carpeting and some of the furniture that has gone in, and so we're excited to see that part of it done. We can kind of get a picture of what the finished products are going to look like in there. So there's the kitchen, the servery, the test kitchen that we have for the district. There's the warehouse space, and in a car rack, we've got it installed. We've got some additional materials coming for the warehouse space here shortly for the buildings and grounds area. Moving on, Dayton Creek Elementary School, still on schedule to open fall of 2021. Next milestones to complete are the exterior of the building, the brick and the roofing, continuing with the full mechanical, electrical, and plumbing throughout the building. We're going to begin the site work and the final grading. We've gotten storm pipes hooked up to the most of the building now, and so we're draining almost all the water away and hooking into the storm lines that the city and the developer putting in right now. Continuing to work on the windows and frames and glass install around the building. So we're getting closer and closer to getting it enclosed, and by the time it gets cold in November, hopefully have it completely enclosed so that we can get start on the interior finishes real hot and heavy. Overhead, the challenge and successes, overhead MEP and sheetrock. We're doing a little bit of sheetrock in some interior spaces that's completely watered or weatherproof. Another 5-star exterior. The brick is almost, they're one pod short of finishing it. Couple of challenges. Delta, our roofing contractor, and Zimmerman, our carpentry contractor. Both of them have to deal with labor, having enough manpower there. Delta's got several jobs they're trying to finish up and pull the crews to. And Zimmerman has been finishing up some summer work and trying to get those done for other schools. So we should have a full crew from them here in the next couple of weeks at the latest. So accident free for 192 days. And Dayton Creek, I will share with you right now the potential change order that we may see, maybe for some sidewalks around the perimeter of it. when they do residential roads, they normally don't put the sidewalks in until and the builder puts them in. Normally, we're having them designed as we're putting our road in, but it wasn't our road to put in, so it's not in the roadway. So we're dealing with that. We're trying to see who ends up paying for it, but again, there could be some potential costs for us for sidewalks. We have it in our contingency. It will not cause us to be over budget or anything, so we have the money if we had to pay for the full amount, but if we have to, the money's there. But just wanted to share that with you at this point. Kind of see some pictures. The main entrance, window framing is going in. You can see it barely in a couple of those pictures. Middle school number 3, again, working on the site acquisition. Hopefully shortly we'll have that nailed down. Other construction projects, the district admin center. Scheduled to open spring of 2021. Next milestones, we've started some sheetrock work in that building, and exterior masonry and roofing is complete, almost complete. Masonry is getting washed down. Then we've got the metal panels to be installed, which are being fabbed right now, so we'll have them on middle to late October. Challenge successes, the masonry company came in and did a great job of getting that done in a very timely manner. Everybody's performing great out there, quite honestly. Mechanical, HVAC, KC Mechanical HVAC, power and gas is in the building, the permanent power and gas by Barch and River Oak. So we're going good there. We're starting the landscape contractors there, getting the sprinkler lines in, and the front of the building that's got the limestone retaining wall. That's some of the limestones showed up, and that's going to be going in the next week or so. I will tell you right now that on October 12th, I've visited with Dr. Burke and the J.E. Dunn guys, and we'd like to invite you guys before the next board meeting to take a walk through and have the board show up and do a walk through the district admin center. I'll let Dr. Burke send out the invite exactly what time he wants to start that. We'll also hopefully have time to go over and give you a quick walkthrough of the Education Support Center at that time too. J.E. Dunn will be there to lead you guys through. So getting on down here to some exterior pictures. You can see the brick and all is done. The windows are mostly installed. They're working on glazing and sealant for them. You can see the roofing is complete. The rooftop mechanical is set up. We don't have the screening on them, but you can also see there on the interior framing and drywall that how much drywall is already going up in that space as well. So any questions for us?
Yeah, Tim, this is Nels Anderson. On the roads and sidewalks at Dayton Creek, are we pursuing a credit with our special assessment on that?
We actually, I don't believe we're part of the special assessment on that. So
okay.
We were lucky enough to be not considered one of the lots in there. So
okay.
Yeah. So we got a pretty good deal out of that part of it. So we're negotiating, trying to find out. There's three different engineering firms that worked on that. So between the three of them, we're trying to find out where the cost should truly lie. So again, normally the builder in the development would put that sidewalk in. So it'd be nice to bid it out at bid time if it falls to us, but we've got unit pricing, so feel pretty comfortable that we can get good value for the dollar if it falls to us. So again, it may be 2 to 3 months before we have that fully hashed out. So
thank you.
Any more questions for Tim? What we've done in the past is whenever we take the board on a tour, because I'm assuming that we're still going to have hard hats and jackets. We've usually asked the board to start the meeting at 6. We would meet at the construction site. We would do a tour, and then we would come back. It is open to the public, but the board would, because of the time constraint, the board would kind of go in a group, and then we'd let the public come in after that.
It is open to the public, but I would caution it's still a construction site. We would prefer to the public stay until we get it finished, but yes. And people will need hard hats, as Dr. Burke said, but also closed-toed shoes, no sandals, no flip-flops, anything like that. We prefer people to wear jeans or pants as well. So, for it. So.
You're asking a lot, Tim.
I know, Jason. Sorry. Don't want you to lose a toe in there in a construction site. Again, it is still a construction site.
It's just the pants.
Any other questions for Tim or Dr. Burke? Moving on to our next discussion item is the reopening plan. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, I've asked Brad Wilson to give you an update. One of the changes that came from the gating criteria was the quarantine and exclusionary that comes from the county. And then when that was over, we left a section for other. So we'll go with it.
Thank you. When we first brought this to you, we told it was going to have changes, and it says subject to future changes. And I think we haven't had a board meeting yet without changes. Changes are fairly simple on this one. Essentially, if you start on page 6 with symptomatic individuals in a school setting, there are significant guidance that we have received from Johnson County Department of Health and Environment, both on what are the conditions for a staff member or a student to be excluded from work or school. Further, there's more information, specific information in the Appendix D, which is specifically the guidance that was provided to us from Johnson County Department of Health and Environment. There is a guide for testing as well as a return to school and contact tracing in that piece that is not in the regular document. Questions on the changes to the plan? Dr. Burke also asked me to go over a different gating criteria that are out there.
Mr. Wilson, I'm going to interrupt for a second. We have had some cases with some students that have gotten COVID-19. And one of the things the health department has said to us that we have minimized the spread because of the mitigation factors that we're using. So for instance, the kids were wearing masks, and because they were wearing masks, the other kids did not have to be quarantined. The fact that the kids were washing their hands, the social distancing, all that did work into our favor, so that when we've had some issues of actual positive cases, we've been able to limit the amount of kids that were quarantined because of that. So that's one of those things that when we put that information out that a student has been exposed, we don't share the students' names, we don't share the information. And then we contact families and say, we'll let you know directly if your child is one that's going to have to be quarantined. But I did want to point out that because of those mitigation factors, we've been able to limit the amount of kids that have had to quarantine.
And I appreciate the update today that of those who have been positive, none have been severely ill and had mild symptoms. That's good to hear.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Wilson. I wanted to make sure we threw that in there.
Yeah, that's a great point, because there are some other area school districts that have not been so fortunate. So there's a graphic that goes through the different gating criteria that are available and the different data sources that may be used. And Dr. Burke asked me to go through those with you, and so I'll do it to a medium level of detail here. We're obviously using the Johnson County gating criteria, which has two components to it. It has the percent positive, and the Johnson County data uses the number of people who have tested positive compared to the number of people who have taken tests. So if there are people with multiple tests or multiple positives, those are not counted. It's purely by people. The other piece that they use is the trend in the county incident rate, which right now is decreasing. And so putting those together, we are in the red, which means elementary is on-site and the secondary is remote. There is also a data set that Kansas Department of Health and Environment uses. And if we had the same gating criteria, we would have, again, a decreasing trend in county incident rate, but the percent positive would be significantly lower because they actually do it by tests as well as antibody tests. And so it's more tests to be divided by. And so the percentage is lower. So if that were the case, elementary would be on site because we'd be in yellow, but secondary would be in hybrid. Additionally, Kansas Department of Education has put out a gating criteria some districts have used. Again, if that gating criteria were being used with Johnson County data, there are actually 4 pieces to the data that it uses instead of 2. There's also a piece on attendance that's similar to what we would have in a normal year with the flu. If there were big enough incidents inside of a building that was causing absenteeism, you may shut just a building. So this piece is not typically used, some have chosen to, but is not typically used as a gating criteria for whether a district is in certain learning modes, but it is specific to buildings. So I will talk about the other 4 pieces that go with that. Percent positive is one. The trend in county incident rate is another one. So 2 of them are in common with the Johnson County. It also works on a 2-week cumulative county incidence rate, as well as local hospital capacity. If you were to use those Kansas gating criteria and the Johnson County data, we would be in yellow. Under the Kansas Department of Education gating criteria, that would mean elementary would be in hybrid mode and secondary would also be in hybrid mode. So in addition to having different criteria, they have different conditions that need to be met in each of those criteria for kids being either on-site or hybrid. If you use the Kansas Department of Health and Environment data, there's a very slight change. Again, it's the percent positive. The rest of them end up being in the same area and you stay in yellow, which again is hybrid for elementary and hybrid for secondary. What questions do you have over the gating criteria and the data sources?
I have a question, Brad. When you say you're using KDHE data, is that just Johnson County data, or would that be using a percentage of Johnson and Miami County data?
They are by county as well.
Well, I realize that, but like when you're talking about what our district would be in, would that be looking at the KDHE data that's just Johnson County, or like 25% of Miami County, 75% Johnson County? Or is it still just taking the KDHE data that's Johnson County?
Just Johnson County.
Okay.
Even in Johnson County, it doesn't tell us which is in our district, just like in Miami wouldn't tell us which is in our district as well.
Mr. Wilson, does KDHE have data for Miami County?
Definitely.
Okay.
Any other questions before I move on? And then Dr. Burke, I think that would be another discussion item.
This is the time that we're talking about the gating criteria. You're going to talk about it. Now's the time to talk about it.
Any other questions? Discussion?
I do have comments, but I just want to give everybody else a chance first.
So on the Kansas Department of Education gating criteria, they use KDHE data, right? So what their gating criteria is the lower right-hand quarter.
Yes, but they don't dictate the data necessarily that you would have to use.
And if we so choose on the gating criteria, we could go with on-site for elementary instead of hybrid, correct?
Well, according to the Johnson County Commissioners meeting, they're encouraging districts to come up with their own gating, depending on what you want to use. Like Blue Valley just announced this afternoon that their elementary is going fully in person on October 5th.
But to specifically answer your question, no. If you're going to be on site, you have to meet certain criteria that our buildings are not able to meet under KSDE's gating criteria.
What criteria would those be?
Brent, I'm going to be frustrated if I didn't bring those. Let's see here. I'm going to give you an about, and Brent, please forgive me if I misspeak and get them wrong, because apparently I did not bring that page, but it's significant distancing, limiting the number of kids in classes that would be well below what we would be able to staff then with teachers. So I don't remember the number, but they were talking in the teens for classrooms and maybe even low teens, if I remember right, but something that we couldn't financially staff with our teachers, even hiring extra.
This is Nels Anderson. I think we seriously need to think about the gating criteria we're using. I agree with some comments that were made tonight. I've felt this myself. I'm not ready to jump out and say we need to do it tomorrow, but we need to be talking about it. And if we're going to just follow the cases, that we're going to be read all semester.
One of the things with the Kansas schools gating criteria, and Mr. Wilson, this might have been kind of what you were getting at. The green for the Johnson County gating criteria, and then there's green for the state of Kansas gating criteria, and they're very similar. For the yellows, for the Johnson County gating criteria, elementary's in person, secondary's hybrid. But for the yellow in the Kansas gating criteria, which is that same percentage positive number, I believe, puts everybody in hybrid or on-site / hybrid for PK through 5. So it limits a little bit more, the states limits a little bit more in the second category. And that could push us into hybrid.
You are correct, Mrs. Mitchell. And in fact, I've pulled up the criteria, and it is students should be grouped together in cohorts of less than 15 students per group. there are other ones that we can meet. Does say that sports recreation facilities for school, but most of them we could meet except for less than 15 students in a class.
Basically, if you decided to go with the KSDE gating criteria, whether it's the Johnson County data or the KDHE data, if you wanted to keep the elementary kids in, you would have to change that aspect of this gating criteria.
You'd have to create your own gating criteria.
That'd be correct.
So it isn't either or, as I was looking at it as well. But I agree with Nels that we need to be looking at what the end game is. And also with Sharon, I don't think that we can ignore almost a third of our district that lives in Miami County and get these kids back to school as soon as possible. I did think that I didn't have a chance. I apologize. I haven't read all of my email yet from today. I'll get to that after tonight, after work. But I think what's most important is, as we're reading these emails from people, is that everything we're hearing is nobody is expecting the principals or teachers to take any kind of fault in this. I think it's interesting what one of them wrote. Her concerns are being made towards the Board of Education and Administration. They're so appreciative of the teachers and of the administration, but I do think we need to talk about safety. I mean, the percent positive, I don't know if it was Nels or someone or one of our speakers that said, looking at one data point seems inappropriate. I mean, the less you test, the higher the percent positive. And just to share some Spring Hill specific data, I did get clearance to share that. Last week we tested 10 in Spring Hill. We had 1 positive, so that means our percent positive in Spring Hill was 10%. Since the start of school, we've tested 35, 6 were positive. None have been severely ill. In all of Johnson County, we've had 24 hospitalizations since the beginning of school. But what I thought was most interesting, and anyone who would like to speak with him, the medical director for Miami County is very available. I talked to him many days to get updated information. Miami County hasn't had 1 person on a ventilator yet, no deaths yet as of Friday. I think that's extremely significant. And I do think if you get a chance, watch the county commissioners meeting from last week. Becky Fast really questioned Dr. Areola. Dr. Lemaster is a medical doctor. Dr. Areola he's a PhD, but and he said that he didn't think we should be looking at just one data point anymore, and that they're reevaluating because they're seeing that it's not appropriate to keep kids out of school. I thought that was pretty interesting too. I know that there have been some, I want to say this carefully to not violate HIPAA. When you hear about teachers or people in the area, we aren't privy to all of their health information. So if someone if a coach or a teacher has died from COVID, we don't know all of their health. The media doesn't know all of their health history. But just with our Spring Hill data alone, we have almost 3 weeks now on Wednesday of our own data. And I don't mean this as a fault to anybody sitting here, but I'm the only one sitting up here that has an elementary school student and middle school students. And it's been extremely difficult. So, I mean, I guess I could have spoken public participation, but I do want to tell the teachers and staff how much I appreciate them, but it has been really very hard. And that's what we're hearing in emails, especially for the SPED kids. Cindy has gone above and beyond. I mean, they have all gone above and beyond and done amazing, but our SPED kids are it's been tough. My youngest has hearing loss and can't understand, can't hear in the classroom, and they're trying to do what they can, but the struggle is real. And so I don't often talk about my own kids, but it's been tough, that's for sure. It's been tough on the teachers too, and I feel terrible for the teachers. They're just doing what we've asked them to do. MAP testing was last week. I heard from 4 different elementary teachers this weekend that they're the lowest scores they've ever seen. They're concerned about that. And I know we're going to get more data about that by next meeting. I'm I guess we should expect the scores to be low after 6 months without school. But another thing that a couple of the elementary school teachers shared with me is they can't do reading groups and they can't do math groups the way that they need to. And so they're really concerned about educational delays. And I don't know how we're not looking at that too. One of them said they're trying to do Zoom from their iPads at their desk with first and second graders, and it just isn't working, but they don't want to speak up because they don't want anybody to think they're being ungrateful. A middle school coach emailed today. I don't know if she emailed all of us. I'll have to look. But this was very concerning. So we have sports and activities in our district, and out of all of our athletes, only 60% could be ineligible to play this week because they have D's and F's. I mean, that's significant. And they're saying that it's directly related to online learning. So I don't know what the answer is. The parents are stressed, the kids are home stressed, and this is not because of what the teachers are doing. The teachers are doing a phenomenal job. But today I talked with Chief Henson in Spring Hill. I wanted to know what the real numbers were, and I think Dr. Burke alluded to earlier that sadly we lost a kid today in Olathe, a 17-year-old committed suicide. Another one attempted suicide this morning. We had a suicide attempt in Spring Hill last week. These are devastating numbers. And why aren't we creating our own data based on Miami County, a third of our district? Why aren't we looking at things like that? I feel like we're constantly in this circular conversation. The superintendents met with the county and said, come up with grading criteria. The county is overseen by the commissioners. The commissioners are saying, no, the school boards are the ones that need to make up grading criteria. Then we get here and we're saying, no, we got to listen to the health department. So we're just running in a circle. And meanwhile, we just approved National Suicide Month and we're losing kids in our county to suicide. We haven't been under 10% since May 17th, which is when we would currently go back full time. We had 10 weeks of conditioning at the high school. We've had sports and activities. These kids are doing such an amazing job. These coaches are phenomenal. And why aren't we looking at some of that data too? I mean, from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe I'm the only one that can't motion to change the gating criteria because I was the only one that voted against it. So it's going to have to be somebody else, or somebody else is going to have to step up and say, we want to change here. But I don't know how we're ignoring the suicides, the mental health, the educational delays, Miami County. I don't understand. And it's heartbreaking to read these emails from these parents and teachers that are saying the 64 that sent in the data last time didn't represent all of them. They're frustrated and don't want people speaking for them. So I'm not sure what to do at this point. I don't know how we keep continuing this way, saying, hold on, we're going to see what happens. At some point, we have to live our lives.
Mrs. Seeling, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You said that, I want to clarify that the reading and math groups in elementary, the elementary can't do reading and math?
So what I was told this weekend by a couple of elementary teachers was that if they're trying to keep them at their desks instead of, in a normal situation, they would gather them by reading level in smaller groups. And so they can't do that because they can't leave their individual desk. So they try to do Zoom with them from their desk and the teachers in the same room. That doesn't work very well for first and second graders. And that, especially with the younger ones, I know that there's such different levels. I know that with my own kids even. But so one of the teachers told me she stayed and rearranged her desk so that the reading groups were closer together, but now she can't work with math small groups. So she's trying to decide between, do I focus on reading or do I focus on math with these groups? And that the test scores, this was all through elementary, and a couple Spring Hill Elementary School teachers reached out and said they've never seen the initial scores this low and that they're very concerned.
So I guess my question is, so you're saying that we should get rid of the mask or the partitions because that has nothing to do with whether we're in or not. These kids are in.
Right.
So I'm asking you what you're asking here or what you're stating here.
I'm saying that I think the teachers need more assistance in how to figure this out.
I think that we are overloading them with things. I tried to look today after one of them asked me about wiping down. They don't have playground equipment that or balls and things that they can use, yet they can swing on the swings and they can be on the monkey bars, things like that. We've got to relax some of the restrictions that are not I couldn't find listed under the orders.
So I'm assuming these teachers have talked to their principals because
sure
they're
they
coming
have.
to a school board member. So I'd like to know that they've already come to the principal and talked to them.
I'm confident they have.
I would like to revisit the gating criteria, but I would like to have some things that we ask the district to do in the next 2 weeks before the next meeting. I'm not prepared to make a motion tonight. We just found out a little bit more information and see several things I think that possibly a little bit more look at Miami County data, seeing how DeSoto, I think, elected to go with a different criteria, possibly surveying the students and parents and teachers, of course. I just think there's some things that we could try to gather some more information before we would even consider making a motion to change things. Just other than that, we're just swinging in the wind. So I really think we need to come up with a list of items that we want to look at and what kind of gating criteria we might want to think about changing to be a little more representative of what's really going on.
I agree with the survey. I would only request that it's anonymous for teachers and parents.
I'd also like to see the testing data. That's something that we haven't quite had put together yet. So obviously another important part.
I agree with Nels. We need to see what our options are. I understand that there's been some people that are doing hybrid and they're probably possibly having more difficulties than online. And I'd like to know more about that. I don't know all the details. It'd be something I'd be interested in. Maybe it's better just to go full on site than hybrid. I've also got a lot of emails from parents that say that 89% of us chose to do in-person school. Well, a lot of those parents chose that because they thought we were going to follow the Johnson County gating. So in our discussions and what we decide to do down the road, we need to give those people an option to possibly go online if they decide they don't want to be part of that 89% anymore. So there's a lot of things we need to talk about as we move through this, and probably maybe a better time down the road or at a special meeting. I'm not really sure where we go from here.
I would kind of agree with some of the things that have been said. I think it's really hard the way we set up this meeting tonight. I mean, I guess I should ask some more questions because I wasn't really clear of what the town hall part was going to be like, because the town halls we've done in the past, we have a lot of information to look at. And I understand this graphic that Mr. Wilson shared with us, and it sheds a little light on it, but unless you have these kind of things in front of you, it's very hard to kind of make sense of this as well. I do think we need to take into account the Miami County data. I think that's only fair. And Doug and I were on a Zoom call with KASB, I think, about the Kansas schools gating criteria. And I specifically asked the question of what school districts do that are in more than one county. And they made a reference, I think, to Andover that covers a couple different counties and how they used a percentage of the data points. The other thing that I think, the health department people put together things like this hybrid model based on the cohort groups and keeping groups of smaller groups of kids together. But I cannot imagine. I talked to a parent this week that has a daughter that's teaching in Eudora, and they just went from in-person to hybrid with elementary. And so she has to teach half the kids in the classroom and the other half at home all at the same time. And I just think that sounds like an impossible task, especially for a first-year teacher. So I would think too that whatever we consider, that we really look hard, and we would need to trust our education professionals for sure on whether that the hybrid thing is really even practical, especially at some of those levels and for some of the skill and training level of the teachers. Just being in constant communication with my daughter that's doing remote learning in elementary school, there's a whole different set of techniques and stuff that you use when you're teaching to kids that are sitting at their computer than when you're sitting right in front of them in person. So that's one thing too. I also, some of the emails that we've gotten have addressed concerns about kids that just can't sit in front of a screen because of headaches or just too much of that screen time. And I don't think there's any way we can really address that with just doing the remote learning. And it's very real issues for people. The special ed seems to be a big concern with people too. So but we have to sit down and really discuss and really have some information. I think along with Brent, like if we can resurvey the people and say maybe a little more specific about we don't really have a handle on what percentage of our people would come back to school right now for in-person learning if we did it. Because we do have some people saying, well, I chose that, I was part of that 89%, but I only thought we were going to do it if it was going to follow this gating criteria. And in our defense with the gating criteria, the Kansas state gating criteria was not available when we voted to do the Johnson County gating criteria. It came out, I think, 2 or 3 days after our meeting. So those are just some of my thoughts. I probably talked too much.
I think you're fine. I would agree with some of the things that have been said. I have received emails from both let's get the students into the classroom, and I've received emails from people saying, stay with what we're doing, including students have said, stay with what you're doing. I think we need to examine the data, both the Johnson County data and the Department of Health, the State Department of Health data, to make sure which one is, for lack of a better term, better. They're very different in how they approach the data at a person level versus at a test level. Which is better data? Health profession or the medical professionals think of it one way versus public health officials. So how do we as a board know which is the best way to go? We have to make that determination for ourselves. As far as gating criteria goes, I do think more data points is better, but this is something that we have to agree to as a board. I would be in favor of either a special meeting where we focus just on this, or in 2 weeks, we bring back a motion to go with a certain gating criteria that we can come up with ourselves, or ask the administration to come up with what they think is best, and figure out which data we use going forward. We need some kind of, I really think we need a resolution to this. I know that we've been talking about this and trying to figure out as we go what's the right way to go. It's very difficult for us. I want to thank the parents and teachers and staff for their patience as much as they've had the last 6 weeks or so. But I think it's time that we can come to a conclusion in another couple weeks to figure out what is best for us, what data we're using, and go forward from there. There have been a lot of questions in the when will this end? I have no idea. This is going to be ongoing for some time. I would love for it to be over in the next month. It'd be great. But until we see significant decreases in positive tests, I think we're going to have to use this at least through the semester. We can reevaluate again next semester. That's perfectly fine. That's the point of this, is we continue to look at the data and reevaluate. We've gone to the point where we've seen the data, we've seen the gating criteria, we've worked with it for a while. Maybe it's time to change because we've reevaluated. I have no problem with that whatsoever. And I think in 2 weeks, I would like to bring a motion on the agenda to select our gating criteria and select our data that we're going to use going forward.
I appreciate you saying that, Jason. I think that bringing a special meeting, while I think that it, like board policy, is important and appropriate, but we have so many people crying out to us right now, hoping that we'll do something differently, that I think a special meeting, whatever we can do to get this in motion.
I agree, but there are people asking us to stay the same course too.
So send us an anonymous survey that each parent and each teacher can fill out as well. I think that as long as it's anonymous too, I think that would be great.
I'm interested.
Oh, go ahead, Brent.
I'm interested to see what the county comes back with after they sharpen their pencil, but they also don't know what that timeline might be. It's interesting in quite a few emails I'm seeing that there seems to be more difficulties in the middle school students, with a lot of straight A students that are just really struggling. And that's what concerns me the most about all this. I know it's across the board, but it appears to might be having a little more difficulties there. So I'm not sure we want to wait another forever, but definitely something we need to get rolling on.
One thing I'd just like to add is that we received probably equal amounts of praise and disdain for separating the activities from the academics. But at this point, I think every school district that just nix their activities has come back and changed their mind. I don't know of any that totally aren't doing activities now. Now, I could be wrong, but I know some of the big schools that said they weren't doing any activities at all, even within other parts of the state, have now changed their mind on that.
I think you're right. I think every Johnson County school is now sports and activities.
So I want to say just a couple of things. I'm okay with revisiting and looking at different options. And I've said that all along, as long as they are based on science and not just some random, it's inconvenient. Right now, what we're doing is inconvenient, and I understand the mental health issues and I understand all of those things. That's part of a pandemic that we are in. When you look at international standards for understanding disease transmission, percent positive is what is the standard. It is an internationally used method for tracking this stuff. And I'm seeing so many things that are being manipulated, numbers that are being manipulated. I mean, I've seen people talking about how, well, they only tested 0.003% today or whatever. Well, I don't want to say this is a perfect system, but I also don't want to discount what's being done. And if you look at numbers, real numbers, in Johnson County, they've tested over 100,000 people out of 600,000 people in the population. I mean, look at those numbers. That means almost 1 in 5 people in Johnson County have been tested. And we're still showing a 10% or higher percent positive. The percent positive, if you look at what that means, it means we're not testing enough if it's high, clearly. But it also means we're not testing enough because we're not catching all the people who are asymptomatic. it also, according to Johnson County Health Department, it means that the spread is so widespread that contact tracing is very difficult at those levels. And again, I'm not saying we have to stay with the current criteria, but if we're going to change the criteria, we need to figure out what's wrong with the current one and have an actual reason to make that change. Simply saying, well, we're never going to get below 5%. I'm sorry, I reject that. I cannot accept that. It's going to be hard. You know, we're going to have to stop doing some of the stuff that people are doing. There are people watching this meeting right now that refuse to go out in public with a mask. It's got to stop. But this can be controlled. The virus doesn't spread without a person, without a host. If we quit putting ourselves out there to be the host, this can be controlled and the levels can get down to a point where we can safely go back and not have to not know where the virus was contracted when somebody does. I just think completely ignoring what the health department is telling us is probably not responsible. The other thing that I really want to make sure that we're not just tunnel focused on deaths and hospitalization. Of course, that's incredibly important. If people are dying, that definitely gets your attention. But this thing is still so new. That's why they call it novel, right? It's a new virus that we're still learning about. And I remember telling the board at one time, hey guys, there's some information coming out that says kids actually can catch this and they can spread it. And now that's becoming more and more documented. Now I'm seeing things that are saying there are serious consequences to contracting this virus, even if you're asymptomatic. Some people, and not all people, but there are a significant number of people who are never getting hospitalized, but who are suffering debilitating chronic fatigue, people who are having heart conditions. It's affecting people's brains. It's affecting all kinds of things that seemingly are unrelated to just a respiratory infection. So those studies are long-term studies. Obviously, we don't know for sure, but those are things that I think need to be taken into account. We can't just say, well, you're not dying from this, 2 weeks and you're better and everything's fine. That's not the case. It certainly doesn't appear to be the case. So again, I'm not saying we can't revisit the criteria, but I don't think we should revisit the criteria simply because we don't like the outcome of this criteria. I mean, if this is based on science and facts and real numbers, and I believe it is, then you don't just discount it for something that's more convenient. So I'm willing to talk about it. I'm willing to entertain ideas of different things, different options, but to just discount what the health department is telling us is, I think, foolish.
I don't think anyone is discounting that at all. I have a science degree and work in this every day, all day long. I know exactly what we're seeing in our hospital systems and all of our clinics. So I don't think anyone's ignoring it, but even the health department, this is a pandemic, it's novel, just like you said. Even Dr. Ariola on Thursday was saying, I don't know if this was the right thing to do to go with this gating criteria. I don't know because it's new. No one is saying ignore them. I'm saying that they don't necessarily know either. We never know with any new virus what the long-term effects is. Every single year we have new viruses. So nobody is asking to ignore any kind of science, especially me.
I'll jump in here. I understand that the health department of Leavenworth County, their red starts at 15%, which I thought it was the same as ours. Also, another thing on the positivity, I was reading the paper the other day and New York was bragging that they were 1.1%. Well, then further in the article, it said they tested 100,000 people that day. So you're right, it is about the number of tests.
Definitely.
So I heard a lot of ideas. What is it that you would like for us to do?
I like what Jason, you were discussing having a special meeting where we could sit down and just work through this together and maybe get some information. I initially wanted to have a representative of the health department come in and speak with us or speak on Zoom and just see what their upcoming plans are and if they had any advice for us, because us being split between two counties, we really don't fall into the same mold as Blue Valley and Olathe.
I think that would be helpful. Ryan Geider was here at the last meeting. He works on the dashboard for Johnson County, and he has offered to come anytime and help explain things as well. I think he would be valuable, and maybe somebody from the Johnson County Health Department and the Miami County, maybe the medical advisor. He has offered to give his input at any time too.
We can see if we can get Cindy Holshaw. She's the epidemiologist for Johnson County. So
I would love to see some medical doctors too.
Dr. Burke, I'd like to ask you to talk with the professionals that developed the Kansas Department of Education criteria. So there's three things that I heard. Just before I go there, I want to relay that I receive more emails saying stay the course than I do just go all in at all costs. That's the experience that I have. I think it does need to be science-based. I think saying the outcome is to go all in is the wrong way to approach it. I think it's decide the criteria, decide the data that we are going to use, and what it tells us is what it tells us. If we're talking about creating our own data and looking at it however we want to, just so we can get kids back in, I think we're wasting everybody's time, and I think that's a fool's errand. I think taking an approach to this of looking at the Miami County data, looking at Johnson County data, I think we have to be very careful about using only client-specific or county-specific data. We're an extremely mobile community. We're extremely mobile population. We have members on this board that work in a different state, work in a different county, work in a different zip code. So I think having multiple criteria is important. I think it helps to balance your results. I think it is a good idea to look at Miami and Johnson County data, but we have to temper that with other criteria. For example, in the Kansas Department of Education criteria, they use absenteeism that Mr. Wilson was talking about earlier. You can use absenteeism down to a building specific metric so that you can segment that data and surgically make decisions specific to that building. So having multiple criteria is important. But my experience is emails from people that say stay the course. Don't change just to because of the inconvenience that it does cause that Mr. Boyle talked about. I think we do all have a perspective. I don't think having kids in a particular school changes how much we care and how committed we are to this district. I think we have an objective view. I think we have a balanced, objective opinion, regardless of whether or not we have students in a particular school. That's why we're on the board. That's one of the commitments we made when we ran for these positions. We have been in school. We made a comment that there was a comment about we've been without school for 6 months. That's not accurate. What is accurate is we have had school. We did have the packets in the spring that finished out the year. We also, this is day 12, right, of school. Right? We are having school. Yeah. 3 weeks, okay. So we have had school. That's just to clarify and accurate, to make statements more accurate. What I did here, I don't think we're intentionally ignoring anything. What I did here is to talk about Miami County data, Johnson County data, I think surveying the parents and teachers is a really critical piece. I've had, again, more emails saying, hey, wait a minute, people keep referencing this 89% number. I'm included in that, but the reality is I signed up for that because I knew that we would maintain safety. I've seen emails where people say the board is not responsible for safety of students. That's a little surprising to me, given all the time, energy, and effort we put into. I think we have two charges as a board: safety of our students and education of our students. That's it. So, Dr. Burke, to answer your question, what I heard was to look at Miami County data and Johnson County data, survey the parents and teachers. I also heard map testing data. My understanding that those results are not complete yet. They haven't been analyzed or vetted through the organization that handles that, but we do need to have that information. It's an important piece of the puzzle. As far as people that I think can provide us some advice, I heard a medical doctor. I heard someone from Johnson County Health Department. My preference would be to be, if we're talking about a Johnson County Health Department, would be not to have the person that works on the dashboard, but to have a trained, educated epidemiologist or infectious disease control specialist. I think there's value in that. I also think we need to talk to the people that created the Kansas Department of Education criteria. As Mrs. Mitchell mentioned, we were on a webinar that talked about how they developed it. They talked about the leniency that was developed and created. They want kids back in school. They talked about the leniency that was integrated into their thought process and integrated into the criteria that they selected. They warned, they provide a cautionary statement that said, if you go more lenient than what we've defined within this gating criteria, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up to elevate exposure, elevate positive tests, elevate the spread of the virus. And so we have to temper our thoughts with that as well. So do we need to review?
I've got, look at the Miami County data, look at the Johnson County data, contact somebody from Kansas State Department of Ed, the professionals, about what they put together to create their criteria, their overall plan. Survey parents and teachers, and making sure the map testing data is available. Those are the four things I had. Was there anything else?
Did you have Johnson County? Did you have
Miami and Johnson County data.
And I think one of the key pieces of this information is to understand what assumptions they made, what approach they took. Understanding the assumptions is very critical, as Mr. Wilson pointed out. Johnson County uses person tests, where the state uses all tests. That's a fundamental difference in how you look at the data. And so having an understanding as to why that was done that way is very, very important, so that we can educate ourselves. I don't think this happens. I might be wrong, but I don't see how this all puts together. We have a chance to synthesize, learn, and understand, and be at a point that we could make a decision by our next meeting. I don't know. I'm open to feedback and input on that as well.
Not to interrupt, but it sounded like you also wanted to have at the next meeting a medical doctor, somebody from Johnson County Health Department, and somebody from Miami County Health Department. Is that correct?
If that's where we're headed, well, if that's where
I would agree.
That's a part of our understanding, or gaining understanding and broadening our knowledge and understanding of the gating criteria.
We may be going to talk about this later. I think I saw an agenda item, but isn't our next meeting a morning meeting?
That is correct.
So that's not very practical.
Would this be better in a special meeting?
We can move the next meeting to the evening.
Is it going to be practical for us to go to an elementary school to have a meeting? I mean,
It's not going to be practical to try to do all of this that you want to do in a morning meeting that's only an hour long, hour and a half long. You're probably going to either have to change that meeting to a night meeting, or you're going to have a special meeting.
I guess we could do both, correct? We could do our short meeting in the morning and then do a special meeting in the evening.
You could do that.
Yep. And I think we need to give our administration time to pull all this together. I think it's 2 weeks is good, is
Agree.
probably not enough, but we'll give them adequate time to pull this together, especially trying to get a survey out to everyone and get results and tabulate the data and give it to us. So I think if we could at least have a special meeting in the evening 2 weeks from now, I think that'd be fine.
What would you like for the survey to ask?
First of all, you need to give those people an out that say if we aren't going to follow the county, then they don't want to be there.
Maybe something to the effect of, if we were to create our own gating criteria based on Miami and Johnson County, would you send your student back to school? And even on the teacher survey, if we were to do that, how comfortable are you in the school?
I think those questions need some thought. I don't think creating questions right now here on the fly is a good way to do that.
I agree.
I think
I agree, but I just kind of needed a general idea.
Basically, we're trying to determine where do parents, what are their thoughts on returning to in-person? Is it in person at all costs? Just go in? Or is it in person? I think I'm going to go back to, I think this needs, asking me to create a question right now on the fly is not the way to do this. I think we have to give it some honest thought and consideration. Questions that can be asked to lead people. Creating questions for a survey is half science, half art. I think we have, within our communications department, we have professionals that are well educated in that. What we're trying to, what is it we're trying to determine from this survey? Let me ask that open-ended question.
And that is probably what I should have asked, which would a better question is, what are we trying to determine? Not the exact question, but what is it you want to know from the survey?
I think from my perspective, we're trying to gauge a level of comfort for our teachers, staff, parents, students, for whether or not they want to use the gating criteria or not. I don't think we should be asking about the data per se, but should we have a gating criteria? And then do they want their students in the classroom, not necessarily at all costs, but with reason, that sort of thing. It's hard to get to those questions without being a little heartless about it, but we kind of have to ask, do you want your student in the classroom with safety measures like masks, physical distancing, that sort of thing? And I'd be willing to volunteer to give a stab at the survey questions and send it to Misty or send it to Candy and have her send it out to the board members.
Maybe if we could all just think about it a little bit and send some feedback in, and we could gather, or Candy could gather that. I think you're right, Doug. It's hard not to write leading questions. It's almost impossible. So I think we have to be very careful with that. I don't know that, and maybe I'm misunderstanding everybody. I don't think I've heard anybody say we want no gating criteria. To ask a question that, do you want no gating criteria to the parents? But
I have seen comments where they just don't want any. So I think it's.
I meant, hold on, I'm sorry, to clarify, I meant from the board. I haven't heard anybody here say.
But that's the public saying they don't want it. I think from our perspective, ever since we've had a reopening plan, we've said we're going to have a gating criteria, whether it was low, medium, or high. Right now it's green, yellow, red. I think it's important to have a gating criteria, but if a survey of people says different, I'd be interested to see that.
Is it possible on the survey to leave room for comment too? If they felt like the questions weren't clear for them, they could leave their own comment as well.
I'm sure we
I
could
think
give it a
one of
character
the
limit.
one of the big things that I'm curious about, because I feel like we've been tasked with making these decisions when our biggest overarching goal of a school district is to make sure that the kids are being educated, right? So I would love to hear from a teacher perspective and a parent perspective, and maybe even a student perspective, how that's working for them. What we're doing now is working for them, maybe just on a scale of 1 to 10, and then with a comment section. Because that's really our most important task. If we can if our school district can educate students just as well with remote learning as we can with in-person learning, then we shouldn't even be concerned about whether they're in person or not, I guess. But if that's not working, I guess I don't even have a feel right now for what's working, what's not working, who's, we can say, well, I got 10 emails saying this and 10 emails saying this, but that's really not accurate representation of reality. So I think we do need to listen to people and what their thoughts are of how things are working for them, all voices in that.
I would add that we do have a responsibility and an obligation to safely educate students. I don't ascribe to the opinion that our only job is education, because I think safety is a part of our obligation. It is a part of our charter.
If I said only, I'm meaning more that's our most important thing is educating the students. Yes, we have to do it safely. But I think overall, what do schools exist for? It's to educate students, not to keep them safe. Not that that's not part of it.
Yeah, we could have a long debate about that, I think, Sharon,
Yes,
because we do fire drills, we do tornado drills, we have SROs. I mean, there's a lot that we do to ensure safety. So I don't want to take us down a different branch, but from my perspective, we have two points in our charter to maintain safety of students, teachers, staff, administration, and to educate students.
I agree with that. I would point out that safety isn't just health, or just physical health, it's mental health and other things too. Good point.
So if we develop questions, that's time. So my question is to the board is, in 2 weeks at our next meeting, do we feel like that? Let me ask the administration, is 2 weeks enough time for adequate preparation? This is a very, very important activity. It's something that we can't run into hastily. Is 2 weeks enough?
We'll do everything that we can to have everything that you want. The one thing that might be a little tough is having the Johnson County, Miami County health officials here. I'm sure we could find a doctor, but having those two, we're just going to have to ask how fast we can get the data out, or I'm sorry, the survey with the data in it, will be how fast that you can get it to us, and then how long you want to let parents have to look at it. So if you want it by the next meeting, I think that we can meet it. It's going to be, it'll be a task, but we can make that happen. But a lot
So-
depends on how fast we get these questions and how long you want the survey to be out to parents.
I have two thoughts. We have many doctors within our district, medical doctors. So that would be nice to ask someone that's familiar with our district. But two, as we're talking about a survey question for one, a survey for teachers and one for parents, I would like that parent survey to be parent/students. Give the parents the opportunity to include their students if they want to write anything, if they have anything to say, if this is their education.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be hard to get a doctor. I think it'll be hard to try to get Miami County and Johnson County here.
So if I would recommend that we plan on having these conversations at our next meeting, but I think having those two professionals here is so critical that if they can't make it at our next meeting, that we establish a special meeting to align with their schedule. I think it's critical that we have their input.
I think we can count on them being there. That's their job. They're here to represent us, and I think they'll be there.
So, do you have enough to go on to Wayne to create a survey with Misty and Brad?
I think so. Brad, what do you think?
I think I'm unclear who's creating the items.
That's why I'm asking. If you're good enough with what we've given you, I don't think we need more.
I think we would put something together and send it out to you, make sure that you're thinking. But it's going to take us a little while to put all this together.
I think Sharon had a good point, though. This is a good opportunity to ask any other questions, like, how is it going for you? Not just what do you want to happen, but how has the first 3 weeks of school been for you and your student?
Right. I think if we can get feedback, if you have enough of a direction and you send us the questions, I think we can go from there.
I think it'll be quicker if we build the questions and items in-house.
Sounds good.
Is there a way when you do the survey that it can only be one email address, or how does that work?
Not if it's going to be anonymous.
Okay.
Just to verify, you will send the questions to us before you send them out, correct?
That's correct. We'd also like to make sure that we send the survey out to our parents or guardians. And then I'm assuming leave a space for them to have something in for their parents or their students as well. Is that what I'm hearing?
Do we need to go ahead and vote on a special meeting tonight? Or can we, since it's 2 weeks out, just make the notification it's an evening meeting in 2 weeks?
Candy, this is in your, I believe we have to vote on it, don't we?
Do we need to motion for a special meeting?
We have to move to add the action item and then vote on the special meeting.
Because I think what you were suggesting is we'd have our regular meeting in the morning and then we'd have a special meeting the same evening. Is that right?
That's correct.
And I motion to move that to an action item. I'm not sure of the verbiage. Mr. President, can I motion to move this to an action item?
I just need a second. Oh.
Second.
So it's moved and seconded to amend the current agenda to add the action item to add a special meeting on September 28th. Add a special meeting in the 27th
at 7 p.m.
at 7 p.m. Any discussion or comments on adding an action item? Did we get a second?
Yes. Jason's a-
Any
Okay.
additional comments or questions? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
approved.
Now you have to vote on it.
Mr. President, I move that the board create a special meeting for September 28th at 7 p.m. to discuss future gating criteria in, well, future gating criteria of the school district.
This is Ally, second.
It's moved and seconded to hold a special meeting on September 27th, 7 p.m. to discuss gating criteria. Any questions or discussion?
It's September 28th,
I was
right?
trying to say September 28th.
September 28th.
We'll yield to our clerk. September 28th. Any final comments, discussion?
Oh, sorry. I wanted to apologize if I insinuated that anybody didn't care because you didn't have elementary or middle school. I did not mean it that way at all. I just meant that that's my perspective right now in my house. So I certainly know that all of you care.
Thank you. Final discussion. Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start with Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
approved.
Thank you. Moving on to discussion items, bond construction up.
We're way past that.
I had
Where did I go in here?
Remote
Remote learning update, Dr. Burke?
Could
Yeah.
we wait, Doug?
Yeah.
Could we wait a second? I had a couple
Sure.
questions that were related to reopening, but not gating process. Could we?
Yeah, we can back up to on the reopening plan.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just curious how the elementary kids, what's their day look like with masks on? Are they masked 100% of the time all day long, or did they get some breaks, or how does that happen?
They're supposed to be getting breaks. When I was in there, I've seen the kids get up and be able to move around without their mask. I've seen kids go out and get drinks of water. I've been into, I believe, all 4 of the elementaries in the last 2 weeks. I've not seen any issues with the kids wearing the mask. They come in the morning, they're wearing them. When they're eating lunch, obviously they're taking them off. I'm sure that some kids would like to have more mask breaks. I believe that when they're outside during recess, as long as they're social distancing, they're able to take their mask off.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not ideal. We've said that from the very beginning.
Sure did. Okay.
I don't know that we've had any kids hyperventilating or had any issues like that, but I'm sure that there's sometimes that there's been a meltdown or two because a student didn't want to wear their mask. But we're not hearing very much of it.
Okay, thanks. And then also curious how the temperature checking's going. How are we doing that?
I think it's going really well. You know what? We still have principals on here. Would any of you principals like to comment on the mask or the temperatures?
Dr. Burke, this is Jody. I would be happy to address both those. I think the temperature checks are going great. We go out at 7:40 every morning. In fact, Dr. Burke was out there this morning, and we take temperatures from 7:40 until 8. And we've got 2 loops, and we've got several people, and parents aren't having to wait, and the kids are just kind of used to the drill now. And they hop out and have a great day.
What are we using to check temperatures?
They're handheld thermometers.
Okay.
I don't like the word that they're called all the time, but there's you can put it right up by their forehead and push
They're
a button and it's pretty
temporal.
instantaneous.
Temporal
like-
is an easier word, right? Temporal.
Yes.
I've heard that the wrist works just as well. As that seemed like better than pointing something at somebody's head all the time, but don't know if that's correct. I mean, I've read that the wrist is just as easily as tells you the same temperature as the forehead.
I've not seen any data like that. I'm not known that we've had any parents complaining about it.
Okay. I'm sorry, Jody, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I also have heard that about the wrist, and what I can tell you, some of us at school have tried it out, and it does read pretty close to the same. So that's something I guess we could look at. But as far as the masks, the kids have lots of opportunities throughout the day. They have recess, they have lunch, they have as many specials outside as they can. PE, music goes outside when they can. The teachers have also signed up for a lot of different areas around Prairie Creek, like learning activities where they could take the kids outside for lessons so that they can take masks off. You know, we try to find as many ways to make that happen as possible.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments on reopening? I would, the only comment I would add in is that in the reopening plan, I know we've had discussions on how the frequency that we evaluate, how quickly changes can and will be made based on the evaluation. I think providing that in the text of the reopening plan when we have the established, or after we have this next meeting, this next special meeting, I think it's a key piece of the workflow of evaluating data against a gating criteria. So frequency of evaluation, and then response times based on decisions made. For example, if you go more strict, that's going to take more time for teachers to have the retool yet again their process of educating our students. If we're going to less stringent, we can, I think you've said in the past, Dr. Burke, that we could be a little more rapid change. So I think it's important that we spell out the workflow of the evaluation and what people can expect based on what the data tells us. That'd be my only comment. Any other comments on reopening plan?
I have one last comment. Is it possible to put on the website the color that we're in and the date that we're going to reevaluate it for the next color or the next time? Something to that effect where people can just go to the homepage, see what color we're in, when it's going to be changed possibly, and then so they can move on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Kind of along with that, I think there's kind of been a misunderstanding that that then we as a board or Dr. Burke, you as a superintendent evaluate every 2 weeks, but really if we're following a certain criteria, that's that entity that reevaluates every 2 weeks. So it's not like there's a big powwow and we all get together and we decide what's going to happen. But I think if people, I don't know how that misunderstanding is out there, but that's what I see. Like when the day comes for the 2 weeks and there's the people that I see on Facebook or whatever, like, well, what'd they decide? Well, it's something you can track and watch on that dashboard every day. So it shouldn't be like a huge surprise to people. So I don't know how to clearly communicate that, but you know.
No, I think that's an excellent point, Sharon, that it's basically we establish criteria and we plug the numbers in from the science, the health professionals. That's what happens. So it's a good clarification to make.
And I agree with that. The issue, and if we change, I think we're going to have something that reflects our gating criteria along with the data that we're using. So we can't go to KDHE to get their gating criteria because it may be different for us because we may use Johnson County and Miami County or a portion, whatever the case may be. So we'll need to develop that somehow, maybe going forward.
So Phil, either you can do this or I can, but can you go to our homepage?
Wondering as he's navigating there, I'm wondering if it's kind of like what Jason's saying, maybe in one of the banners that's like a stop sign or a yellow sign or a green sign that just says next evaluation date is this in the banner instead of trying to find it in the FAQs.
So right now, if you go to the 2020-21 reopening information, it's a big purple thing. Click on that, Phil, please. That one right there. Click on that. Look in the big red right in the middle. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. It's just, I think people are expecting maybe I was hoping that it would just be on the front homepage without a click, if that's possible.
We'll see if Misty can make it on the front page.
I appreciate it.
What are the comments on reopening? Okay, moving on to the next discussion item is remote learning update. Dr. Burke?
I'm going to turn this back to Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. I was asked to give a brief update on how remote learning is going. And we talked about that a little bit tonight as being something that we wanted to hear. First, I was going to explain that the remote learning was designed specifically to be modeled after on-site learning. We use our current teachers. Our teachers use their current curricular outcomes, and then the lessons are adapted for a remote environment. The scope and sequence stays pretty much the same as what they would be on site. We're really encouraging live interaction. So between the teacher and the student, student-teacher, and then between student and student. And so the purpose for that is so that we can facilitate easy transition to on-site from remote and vice versa as needed. Because in the plan, and it was specifically planned to follow a criteria that would determine whether we are in remote, on-site, or hybrid. Remote and virtual are a little different. Typically, virtual is a permanent, at least a year. They work on really focusing on student work, oftentimes a specialized curricular program. Remote that we're doing is more of a temporary to be able to switch back and forth. It focuses on high interaction, and it's using the current tools that we already have in the district for the most part, because it's using the current teachers with limited time to retool. We have similar grading as to on-site. Sometimes grading in virtual is more of a modular that is able to transition to different programs. And then we are designed more for interactive problem solving as opposed to virtual, which is designed for credit acquisition sometimes. Those are probably gross generalizations, but I wanted to make sure we knew that there's a difference between what we're trying to do with remote and what some programs are doing with virtual. Talked to the principals. They've talked obviously to the teachers to great lengths. They said it is going as well as expected. I don't think any of them would tell you that it's going perfectly. They have told me that relationships can sometimes be challenging in remote, even though we've designed it to have the high interaction. I think it still is difficult. We've had a few internet inconsistencies, sometimes with same families, and so there's some challenges there as well. It's been very well organized. I think you guys have all talked about how the teachers have done a phenomenal job. There's been good communication. The learning process has been slower, even though it's similar content. The process is slower because obviously there's some technology interaction that goes on with that. And then supervision, real time, is a little different than trying to do it when you get a group of kids together in a learning, virtual learning environment where they do a group. Teacher can't always be in that same group. They have to move from group to group. So real-time supervision is a challenge, but I would reiterate that they were very pleased with what their teachers have done. I think we'd all be very pleased at the organization, the work they've put in, and what they've done for kids. I don't think anybody would argue it's the same as being on site, though.
You guys have any questions?
General sense on feedback from parents.
Overall, very, very appreciative. I think we probably are more critical internally than probably our parents have been for the most part, but you have parents that are very frustrated by it. We've heard from some of those, but we probably overwhelmingly have heard parents just being very appreciative of the efforts and the interactions that they're getting with teachers.
The one thing that we would ask is if a parent's having some issues, please contact the principal of your children directly. And that gives the principal the opportunity to try to work the issue, whether it's a teacher maybe not feeling like they're giving enough time to the child, whether there's some special needs, circumstances going on, whatever that is, if the principal knows about it, it gives them the opportunity to work on it.
Yes, Dr. Burke, and I'd also say that many of the issues might be able to be dealt with the teacher as well.
I'm sorry, I meant that too. It should go straight to the teacher first and then lowest level first.
Hey, Brad, I have a question. Do you guys have any numbers on attendance or any information on how it's working?
We do have data on attendance. It is similar to last year. We have attendance this year that I think is greater than the attendance for all of last year, which is how we measure one of the gating criteria. So we've looked at that. Attendance this year compared to the first week or so from last year is a little lower.
Could we continue to get that data too? That would be helpful.
Sure, we've set it up in our internal data systems to be able to measure that.
And I know some of that is skewed sometimes, even with my own, when they haven't been able to get on right away and then they're counted tardy or absent, and then they weren't actually because they're late. But so I know that's not a perfect.
Yeah, it takes us a little bit to go through the data, make sure it's cleaned up, and it's probably been a more difficult process than normal with it being virtual in that respect. So we will certainly do our best to get you the best data possible. I will say that the attendance rate, our average daily attendance, typically 93, 94, 95, and we've been in that range.
I've overheard quite a few Zoom meetings in my house, and I know the teachers are trying. They're actually very witty and funny. I can hear them from upstairs. They're doing such a good job. And I will say that PE is interesting online. My 6'6" football player can't do it upstairs or the pictures fall off the walls with jumping jacks. So he has to be in the basement. But it's been interesting, but they've been really great with them. And I know they're trying to pull them out into breakout rooms and different things to help them as well. So I know the teachers are doing everything they can. And I appreciate that.
I don't know any teachers that don't think they're very funny.
If you see any patterns in the attendance, could you please pass that on that you might want to let us know about?
Yes,
I
sir.
would think that would be good information to look at when we look at at our special meeting, look at all the different things to have that attendance data if it's possible.
We had that, I think you said in 2 weeks, we should have MAT testing data too, right? That was on the list.
We think that we could have it in 2 weeks.
I can't guarantee that, but
Even
we'll
if it was
get it
just
to you as soon as we can. The way MAP works is they create the aggregate reports for us. That's not just raw data that Gown knows, and we create the reports. They create those reports for us. And I know they are not currently up to date with this year's testing yet, so I don't know when that's going to be exactly.
We'll do our best, but we can't control them.
When we're talking about attendance, we're talking about a comparison between 2021 to 2019, 2020, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions or discussion on remote learning update? I would just reiterate what Dr. Burke and Mr. Wilson said, is that the most efficient, effective way to affect change or to get issues addressed is to first contact the teacher, then contact, if that doesn't resolve the issue, to contact the principal, and then if that doesn't resolve the issue, to contact superintendent, assistant superintendent,
Assistant soup and then the soup.
assistant superintendent, then the superintendent.
The only thing I would add to that chain would be if it is a special education issue, make sure it goes to Cindy Jados, the director of special education.
Right. I think it's really important that we emphasize that process because it has been proven time and time again, year after year, that that's the most efficient and effective way to have your issues addressed. Any other comments or discussion on the remote learning update? Moving on to discussion item 8.04, morning board meetings. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, I wanted to visit with you about this. It's not as simple as just having the meeting at the building. We're limiting who can go into those buildings. And so obviously we can make an exception for the board, but remember, board meetings are held in the public. And so something that we have to be considerate of is if you're going to have a meeting in the building, then we have limitations on space where we can have the meetings, and then we need to talk about how we're going to provide or allow who to come in to watch those meetings. So I need some guidance from you.
I think we should move those meetings to the evening at the board office.
Yeah, maybe just do it through the end of the calendar year and then kind of regroup and see where we're at.
I'm sorry. So, Eric, you're saying that we should move them to the evening?
Well, I mean, as long as we're under all these restrictions, I don't think we should be creating more issues for the staff and stuff in those buildings. Let's just have a normal board meeting.
Are they wanting to focus on their school meeting though? I mean, I think that was kind of the purpose of this. So
The original purpose was to get the board in the building so that they could hear directly from the principal and the school and the students. And then, if possible, to actually get you in the building to see the building.
I know our elementaries don't or have a no visitor policy, but what is the opinion of our administrators?
Are you talking about having the board meetings at their building, or are you talking about the no visitor policy? What question are you asking?
I'm saying I know they have a no visitor policy, but would they like to have the meetings in their buildings? What is their opinions?
Let me offer my opinion. I don't think we should create additional issues with building administration. We have an impact when we're on that building. Right now, these buildings are stretched. They're the efforts, the activities that they have to go through, very stringent, very difficult, and I don't feel comfortable adding to that. So my suggestion, my recommendation would be to move these to the evening meetings. I like the idea that Sharon presented, and both Eric and Sharon presented, in that let's provide for a dispensation through the rest of this year. As far as morning meetings go, move them to evening meetings at the board office, and still have that, or still at least inquire about the possibility of having a building, that building presentation. Does that help, or did I just confuse the issue?
Well, yes, but let me throw something out. You could do the morning meeting at Hilltop, and then that way you would only have the staff that comes over there, and then you're keeping the adults out of the building. So you could still allow the staff to come in, do the presentation there, talk to you about their school, and then not have to worry about people coming in and out again. If you want to move it to the meeting, that's fine. The evening, it's fine. But you've already got a conflict on the 28th.
What's the least disruptive to the school, to the individual building? Move it to the morning, keep it in the morning, move it over to Hilltop, still provide Zoom access so that we can have public.
That's what I would recommend. Just moving it out of the building to Hilltop and let them still present and come in with you.
I like that idea.
Do you have the direction you need, Dr. Burton?
I'm fine with that unless anybody has concern.
I'm fine with that too. Just keep it in the morning at Hilltop, especially since we already created a special meeting for September 28th just to accommodate that.
And we can still reevaluate at the end of the semester, like Sharon suggested.
So can I get some clarification?
Sure.
We're going to have the regular board meeting in the morning at Hilltop. And then in the evening, we're going to have a special meeting where?
At Hilltop.
Oh,
we'll talk about it here in a minute.
Okay.
We ready to move on?
Moving on to
discussion item 8.05, 2021-2022 district calendar. Dr. Burt?
I'm going to turn this over to Katie.
Okay, well, we usually do this at the, sorry, hold on. We usually do this in like March or April, but because of everything that we've had going on, we did not. However, we did get this out to the Superintendent's Advisory Council about a month ago for review. We sent it out to 25 members and we got feedback from 20. And if you open the attachments there is draft A and B. And from the results that are also posted there, 60% voted for calendar draft B. The primary feedback that I received was the biggest reason for liking draft B better was because it is a midweek start for the school year. And also, I heard from a student and a teacher that both said that they really liked draft B as well because it wouldn't break up finals at the end of the school year into 2 different weeks. So those were the primary reasons for preferring draft B.
Any questions or comments about draft B 2021-2022 calendar?
Thank you, Katie, for putting that together.
Sure.
Okay, moving on to informal discussion and presentation.
We'll bring this back for action item.
Okay, moving on in our agenda to informal discussion presentation.
Before we get to, I'm going to allow the administrators that unless you are part of the meeting that's going forward, we're going to let you have a good evening.
And thank you for everything you've done. Moving on to possible dinner for board meeting to honor Teachers of the Year. Dr. Burke?
Well, actually, this is Sharon Mitchell brought this up, but one of the things that we got to looking at is in the past, we've not really invited the Teachers of the Year to the December board holiday dinner. And since we're wanting to recognize them, and we've already got a dinner set up, I thought it might be able to be a chance to feed them dinner and honor them at the same time. So I was just going to throw this out and see what the board thought about that.
I think that's a perfect idea.
I'm all in favor.
Anyone against that?
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Okay. Any other discussion or comment on that? Moving on to informal discussion presentations to discuss the format of the meetings due to echo in the building, the new district administration center. We're listening to the echo as we speak.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Okay, so I brought this up at the last meeting. Really, I think when we started the whole Zoom thing, it wasn't the understanding that we should be able to just not come to meetings. And I'm really not, I know it sounds like, Eric, I'm singling you out, but I'm really not trying to. I'm just trying to understand what our goal is with the Zoom like it's going, because I think originally we felt like we could do like kind of a Zoom of the whole group, and then that would be broadcast to YouTube and not have to have our individual screens. Now I do realize I've had times where I've been quarantined or today I'm out of state, so this was a way I could join the meeting, but we haven't ever had it set up where you could just not really attend. You could be elected to the board and never attend a meeting in person, but just join on Zoom. So it may be just something that we need to look at with our board handbook, and that special meeting that we do on the 5th of October, kind of discuss that. But the reason it kind of came to my attention kind of physically was because it just gives me a headache to listen to the echo for 3 hours or however long our meetings are, 4 or 5 hours. And by the end of the night, it's just not good. So, and it's just hard to speak when you just hear that echo all the time. So that is why I brought it up.
I think it's also hard for the public participants. I mean, at 5 minutes, they are delaying because they're listening to the echo, and so they're talking very slow, and it's not really a 5-minute. So my question, and maybe Phil, I noticed when watching a couple other board meetings that they were using auditoriums, and is that set up better, like with the sound system, and is that an option, or what are the thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about this a little bit. So the first thing is I have to have a way to get everybody's audio in. So if you don't have your individual device, then I have to have microphones. The only place currently set up is Hilltop's boardroom at the board table. So if that's not what we're going to use, then we need to figure out where we're going to set up, and we'll have to add microphones for everybody. Because we can do this as a hybrid where just the remote people are on Zoom, and then as Sharon suggested, it's a one big room that is the other member of the Zoom meeting. The biggest issue right now is just getting the audio.
The dais that you want, or if you want to call it that, at Hilltop is not big enough for us to socially distance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But technically, we could meet out there and just make sure we wear a mask, because we're doing that already. So that was something I was going to bring up anyway, is we could move back out there. We could use those microphones. We just wouldn't be able to socially distance.
Well, I'm all in favor of doing something different because apparently I have ADD or something, and the echo screws me up constantly. I would prefer to just do this in person. I know that we're trying to do the live feed for YouTube. I would prefer to do this in person and then have the YouTube feed come back whenever we get to our district administrative center, and so that we can live stream again.
I don't know how we stop YouTube in this climate right now with people that aren't comfortable. Like, for instance, maybe Eric's not comfortable being in person, and that's okay. There's other people that aren't comfortable coming to a board meeting too, so this is their only option. I don't know if now would be the time to stop that.
Maybe it's something that we just need to suck it up till we get in our new building. But I do think that when we do the board member handbook, that's when we could address the point about the expectation of people being at a meeting in person. Because that's kind of a new phenomena right now. I mean, our only option before Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever was just to call in. And it was, sometimes there was a delay, sometimes it was just hard to understand. So it wasn't as viable of an option as we have right now. And maybe we do want to say, you don't have to come in person. You can just come in Zoom, but I think we need to have the discussion about it.
So was it an option then to move to Hilltop and continue Zoom like this without the echo? Was that one of the options I heard?
The way to do that would be to have everybody speaking into a microphone.
Guys, I'm working from home, obviously. Just an observation, whenever I hear a big echo, I can scroll mouse over the faces and see who's not muted. If everybody would mute, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that it reduces that echo considerably.
Not when you're there in person. You have an echo no matter what when you're there in person.
And let me,
of course, if somebody's not muted.
Yeah,
no,
let me clarify real quick. You're not getting an echo, you're getting a delay. And so I'll just explain the slight difference. The echo that Eric hears is due to other people's mics being open. The delay that you hear is because the audio is being processed into Zoom and then projected into the room. So there's a delay between the time which you said it and which Zoom got it back to the system and broadcast in the room. So they sound the same, but there is an echo that Eric's talking about and the delay that Sharon's talking about.
And that delay is the reason when people are presenting, it's very hard for them to present at the podium, right? Because they're also on that delay. So they're trying to talk really slowly. And then, I mean, even when our principals were presenting a couple weeks go, it was really hard for them. They couldn't hear us. So it's really loud when you're in person on the speaker, but I know we're just doing the best we can.
It's kind of like when you're in the stadium and you're on the microphone in the stadium and you hear it out broadcast and it kind of delays back that way, I guess.
And I also would like to add that, you know, I have, I think, a good many years of pretty good attendance at the board meetings. There are people in my life that I feel the need to probably overprotect. So I'm staying away from you guys and staying away from most people these days. But it's not a matter of convenience. You know, I have some close family members that I cannot put at risk.
What would the guest capacity be at Hilltop? Do you have an idea?
I think we were able to get 16 to 18 people in there.
The one additional piece to that, Dr. Burke, would be whether the board was sitting down on the floor or up in their board table.
That's true. We could probably get another 10, maybe 15 people if the board moved up back to the stage.
And we're wearing our masks up there, so we should be okay.
Yep.
Would it be even possible to move Candy and Katie down to the floor and even close by so that we could spread out just a little bit more? Would that be too difficult for them to be involved in what's going on?
Candy said that'd be fine.
Assuming it's close enough that I can get audio, yes. Because that's the biggest issue here, folks. We've got to make sure that everybody has a microphone. But we could eliminate the headsets and the use of Zoom by the individuals in the room.
Bill, if we put desks behind the big curb desk for like Katie and I, could we still get microphones back there? Because there's quite a distance in that room.
Yeah, we'll come up with a solution for that. I just wanted to throw that disclaimer out there.
Okay.
So I'd say we move back to, I think the consensus is to move back to Hilltop so that we can get rid of this echo. Phil, if you could check and see really what the capability is.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns.
Okay.
As long as everybody can have a microphone and you feel comfortable sitting at the board table.
Now, how many people did we have at last meeting? Because this next meeting is going to be well attended. So that's the only thing I could say. I know this is really tough, but we're going to have one more meeting that's going to be really well attended. So
I think we have about 42 chairs out there, give or take a few. What other districts are doing, though, is they're having however many people that can come into the room, and then the other people stand outside. They come back in, they speak, and then they leave.
Okay.
So that's something that we could do.
And we could have a screen set up or something if they wanted to monitor it. Okay.
We could figure out a way to put a speaker out in the hall so that they could hear what's going on.
Yeah,
Or
there's
even have
quite
a
a bit of
computer
room.
Zoom.
Quite a bit of room in Hilltop in the halls. We can set them out physically distant.
And I will say that, Phil, I know you warned us about that before you did it. So you were right once again, but I do appreciate you working to find some solutions to it. So thank you.
It's just like with anything else, you had to give it a try.
So Dr. Burke, if I could, I'd like to go ahead and transition into the new boardroom. So what I have on the screen right now is a architectural rendering of the new board space. The two screens represent what would be used during a board meeting. And then the lady here with her arms would be the speaker or the presenter. And then, of course, the board sits around the table. We've actually held off on the audio and video for this room specifically, trying to get a little better feel on what the board's expectations are going to be. We are kind of at the deadline to start making a little more finite decisions. What I would like to know, if we continue with the YouTube and we want to broadcast from here, the audio isn't a concern, but the video, I need a little bit of an understanding of the board's expectations. What of this picture would they want to go out to YouTube?
Well, I'll go with my expectation. Got to turn my mic down. My expectation would only be 2 cameras, 1 camera looking over the board, the whole board, and then 1 camera for the presenter. Ideally being able to switch back and forth between those 2 as they're speaking. I don't think we need individual cameras for individual board members or the superintendent. But 1 big picture for that and 1 picture for the presenter.
That will require a full-time staff member just to do the switching.
We get one that caught the presenter and the board, and not the everybody sitting in the audience.
I think we could probably arrange an angle that would meet that expectation. Yes.
That'd be fine with me.
So a single camera looking at a single picture like we're seeing right now. Is that?
I think the other challenge, and if you look at the screen in the room, not your screen, the question becomes, do we have a small picture-in-picture with what the presentation is the majority of the screen, or are you more focused on seeing body language and who's speaking?
I'm going to insert my own opinion. I think the board ought to consider hiring someone to operate that system and have that second camera. One of the things that we've been talking about is some additional positions that we really need, because as we're expanding, we probably need another technology position. And along with that, we need someone that is a technology expert who also works with facilities, someone that operates the cameras in the schools. If we put a camera doorbell, some different things like that. So we're looking at maybe trying to add a position like that anyway, and that might be one of this person's responsibilities, is to work board meetings and operate the system. I think you ought to think about it.
I do think the way that Johnson County, the commissioners meeting does it would probably require a full-time person there at the meeting running the camera, but they, have the kind of the overarching view of the commission. And then as people speak, either the presenter or the commissioner asking the questions, it goes back to them. So I guess it kind of depends on cost versus if you want to say transparency or whatever it is that you want to call it, the actual quality of the video that you're putting out to the public. But we haven't done anything in the past, really, except what we're doing now. So anything that we do is going to be much more professional, overall than what we've been trying to do to bring it about, I think.
I think that's a good point also, Dr. Burke, if you're already looking to hire somebody, and we could use them in this capacity as well. I've, before this, admittedly, never watched other districts' board meetings, so that's been interesting, and it does seem kind of like the Johnson County Commissioners meeting. I could see how it takes somebody to run that camera to focus in. So in this picture, Phil, so it's the board members up on the stage, and then over to the right where your mouse is now, that's where.
Yeah, that's
Candy.
Brad and Doug.
Okay.
Or the current plan for Brad and Doug, anyway.
They don't need chairs.
Is that 7 board members? I only see 5 monitors up there, but
Yeah, there's one monitor for 2. That's actually displaying what will be on the screen here. And then of course you'll have your own device.
so there's only 5 monitors?
Yeah, so the monitors will be shared by 2 people. It's a relatively large monitor, so that you can just see what's being displayed on the presentation screens here and here.
Okay.
So would that be like the 2 monitors we have now?
Mm-hmm. What's possible, Phil?
Enough time, money, and people, we can do anything.
Well, right, but let's think about possibilities. So if we think about having someone switching camera angles, is that how does that align with what might be in the future? So if we think about future-proofing this thing and thinking about things that we may want to do in the future, it seems like having a single camera with just sitting in the back of the room is limiting. What are the other possibilities to future-proof this a little bit?
Sure. So we added quite a bit of additional conduit with no uses right now to future-proof on purpose. So from the audiovisual closet, which is this door right here, we have quite a bit of conduit in and out of there to be able to add additional cameras, speakers, other technology solutions. We put some more in the floor to be able to add some additional technology requirements to the board table, to the presentation station. So I think we're pretty safe just from a future standpoint. The ceiling is an open plenum in there, so we have easy access to get into that space and add additional cameras. Our expectations would be to have ceiling mounted cameras, and that's a matter of replacing a ceiling tile or attaching it to the grid.
Is there potential experiences we could give to students as far as running cameras and producing this kind of thing?
Yeah, that's always an opportunity. We've kind of tested the waters with that at the school itself to try to get some involvement in activities. I think as we grow, that opportunity might be a little easier, but some of the challenges we ran into, in previous years was just that the same kids wanted to do that were also involved in the activity. So, but again, as we grow, I think that opportunity becomes easier.
Okay, so it sounds like a couple cameras, that 2 cameras with someone running them so that we can have focus on presenter and board.
Yeah, I think I've got what I needed. I just need to get a vision for where the board's expectations were, and I think I've got enough to give you an option or 2 to bring back when we price it.
Very good, thank you. Any final questions for Phil? Thank you, Phil. Moving on to items from Board of Education members for future meetings. Anything to add?
I can give an update on the Mission Southside food assistance. We're still working on that. I've been working with Aaron Schaefer and talked to Tim Meek about it as well, and need to speak with JC Dalton. Mission Southside is willing to take on and partner with our local food pantry and other pantries to make sure that the students that are needing additional food over weekends and long holidays and breaks, including the summer, we're working on that as well. So just trying to fill the gap.
Okay, thank you. Any additions to this list?
Dr. Burke, do we have a date for the board retreat yet?
Katie had sent that out, and I think there's still some conflicts, so she will resend it.
And then I think we can take off the bottom one since we'll have a special meeting on that. You agree with that, Brent?
The bottom one? I don't recall putting that on there. We can.
We will tour the education service, well, at least the district administrative center, and try to have time to go ahead and do the education service center in the first meeting in October.
Any additional items? Moving on to the board work calendar, Dr. Burke.
I think we're right where we should be for September.
That's good. Moving on to committee reports. Reports from the Board of Education on committees you've attended.
I did attend the Spring Hill Middle School Site Council, and overall it was really positive. I think, of course, you know, with site councils, there's a lot of parents on those, and people obviously had some frustrations with the remote learning. But what was really exciting for me to see and hear was just the team kind of unity that the building seemed to have put together with the instructional coaches and the principal and then all the staff. And the kind of the highlight for me was hearing them talk about opportunities. You know, we talked about our last meeting that with all the challenges, if we can also look at those as opportunities. And they talked about how some of their situations actually made like that augmented instruction. I can't remember exactly what they called it, but when there would be a student kind of struggling in a Zoom class, they could actually put them in a breakout room like right that minute, and there would be another instructional coach or maybe an administrator come in and work with them like right then. And it was like more of an opportunity to do some really specialized instruction that wasn't really available in person. So to me, that was kind of exciting to see a little bright spot of an opportunity out of that site council meeting.
Anything else? I would like to inform everyone that within our own ranks, Mr. Jason Wimbold, he has the nominating committee for the Kansas Association of School Boards has endorsed his candidacy for president-elect for the Kansas Association of School Boards. So Jason, congratulations. It's well deserved. It's an honor that we know that you deserve. We appreciate your commitment to that organization, the Kansas Association of School Boards, and to be endorsed by the nominating committee as the president-elect is a great accomplishment. So congratulations to you.
Thank you, Doug. It's something I've wanted to do for a while. I think my experience on the board of directors has helped with that. So I look forward to the journey I have for the next 4 years. I do have a re-election within that, so I have to make sure I get re-elected so I can fulfill my promise to the nominating committee. It's kind of humbling, but I have a vision for the association that I'd like to fulfill, and I appreciate everybody's support and guidance. I think we all work very well together and want to support each other. So I appreciate. Thanks, Doug.
You're certainly welcome. You've earned it. Any other committee reports? Moving on to superintendent reports. Dr. Burke?
I'm good. I'm good.
You're good. That's fantastic news. Spectacular. Moving on to executive session, we do need an executive session, two of them, in fact, for our meeting this evening.
Mr. President, this is Jason Winbolt. I move that the board go into executive session to discuss potential properties for a new school site pursuant to the exception for preliminary discussion of the acquisition of real property under coma. Those to be in session include the Board of Education members, Superintendent of Schools, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, and administrators as requested. 15. The session to begin at 9:45 and resume in this place no later than 10 p.m.
Need a second? Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Sharon. Moved and seconded to move to executive session to have preliminary discussions about the acquisition of real property under coma. Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start with Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Seeley.
Yes.
Approved.
Mr. President, Jason Winbolt, I move that the board go into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel to protect privacy interests of an identifiable individual under coma. Those to be in session include Board of Education members, Superintendent of Schools, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, and administrators as requested. The executive session to begin at 10:05 and return in this place no later than 10:30.
Second.
All right. We're going to start the vote with Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Approved.
You got, wait on that. You got Allie coming. Hey, are you waiting to log in? Hey, just for the board members, I want you to know,
Are you in live session or you just?
I thought it was in live session.
You want to go to YouTube or not? Yeah. Okay, you're fine then.
Because the other board members aren't on here now, Phil.
I know, but YouTube, I sent YouTube live, so.
Oh, there they are. Hey, just for the board members, I wanted you to know real quick, Ron Stiles came by and provided you a free book. And so the board members that are here tonight have their book. The rest of you, if you want to swing by the office, we'll get it to you, or we can get it in the mail. So however you want it. But I've started reading it. Those of you who were 10 years ago, you knew Nathan. It's a great read. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Burt. We we've got an action item associated with regarding personnel.
Mr. President, this is Jason Winbolt. I move that the board approve the acceptance of resignation of an administrator.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to accept the resignation of a administrator. Final discussion. Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Winbolt.
Yes.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sealy?
Yes.
Mr. Boyle? Mr. Boyle?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Approved.
Move
We
to
are-
adjourn.
I'm sorry.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.